Hi guys, Totallydubbed here, and today we're going to be looking at if it's worth upgrading your graphics card. Now for those who might not be aware, Nvidia recently announced their RTX 3 series graphics card, and on paper it seems they completely trounced their 2 series siblings. The thing is here, a lot of people might own the 2 series graphics card or were thinking of upgrading. As such, I have the RTX 2080 Super, and PNY/XLR8 sent me the 2070 Super. Now this card can be found for around £480 in the UK, and I'm sure prices will start dropping very soon with the announcement of the 3 series cards coming out. Now, if you're interested in purchasing any of the cards that I mentioned, including my 2080 Super, at least not mine, but you know what I mean, then you can find the locally link in the description below. Will take you to your localized Amazon store. Also down there, you'll find a link to my Instagram, so it's at Totallydubbed. Very much appreciate a follow. And if you're interested in all electric or hybrid vehicles, do check out Totally EV. It's my own car-centric website, and it covers, well, basically everything you need to know, including latest reviews of all the latest electric cars. So that's pretty cool, and yeah, I'd very much appreciate your follow. So let's see if the 2070, 2080 Super are good enough for 1080p, 1440p, and 4K gaming. So first off, let's quickly look at the RTX 2070 Super that we've got over here. It's a 3-fan design, so a triple fan design, and it's pretty long. It's 314 millimeters to be precise, and in terms of its width, it's 128 millimeters. I think that's mainly due to the brackets over here. Now in terms of power input, it's got an 8+6 pin input over here at the top, which is well designed. If you don't have 8 pin, they do have an adapter over here which splits from 8 pin to 2 6-pin power, so that's for your PSU. Now the only thing I've got in terms of the design of this graphics card is the fact that the backplate, which is here, which is nice to see included, has the GeForce RTX logo the other way round. This should be flipped this way round, so that when people are inserting their card like so, they can see GeForce RTX. Now this doesn't really concern me, but I can imagine some people will be a little bit kind of OCD about it and would have preferred this logo being flipped the other way around. Another thing worth knowing is that this doesn't have any RGB lights or any software. In my case, I think that's a great thing, but some people who love RGB lights will be a little bit disappointed that there's no fancy RGB lighting anywhere on the card. This graphics card will draw around 215 watts of power. That is at its maximum using at 100% load, so it's just worth bearing it in mind in case you need to have the right PSU setup. I would suggest with most RTX graphics cards with a full system to have at least 550 watts of power. I've got 750 watts, but that's, I think, overkill. In terms of display outputs, it's got one HDMI 2.0B port and 3 DisplayPort 1.4 ports. It's slightly a shame not to see USB Type-C ports included, but that said, you can always get an adapter, so it's not too much of a bother. Now in terms of specs, this graphics card has 2560 Nvidia CUDA cores, yeah, all those CUDAs, and it's got 8GB of VRAM. Its core clock runs at 1605 MHz with its boost clock at 1815 MHz, and it runs on a 256-bit memory interface. So that gives you an idea in terms of the specs. But how does it actually perform? So what I first did is I did a bunch of different synthetic benchmarks. From 3D Mark to VR Mark to UniEngine, Heaven and Valley. These are all different types of benchmarks which all appeal to different types of people. What you'll see here on your screen is that in every single benchmark, unsurprisingly, the RTX 2080 Super is better than the 2070 Super. But honestly, not by that much. There is some differences, but they're not kind of night and day. It's just worth seeing that as a higher resolution goes, the differences or the discrepancies between the two graphics cards become slightly larger, which is unsurprising again because the RTX 2080 Super is, well, a more beefy graphics card. Now throughout the benchmarks that I was running, I was also running GPU-Z in the background and looking at the sensors to see how much of the fans were being used and what temperature did the GPU get to. Surprisingly, the fan speed got to a maximum of 58%, which is actually pretty crazy considering I threw every sort of benchmark at it and full-on gaming and even video rendering. And here the maximum temperature was 74 centigrade. So in other words, the fans not only are silent, but they're also very well at cooling the graphics card. To give you an idea of how it sounds and specifically how it compares to the 2080 Super, here is a little clip of how it sounds when it's video rendering and then how it compares to the 2080 Super. Now with that out of the way, let's get on to real world benchmarks, and by that I mean how does it actually perform in actual gaming. And for me, as I owned it for over a month now, I really wanted to see how it performs, so I put a camera in the background, just hit it record, and was just playing my normal games. So first off, I played Counter-Strike, which is the least intensive game that you might think about, but FPS numbers are very important. You don't really want to be dropping under 144 Hz. Now for me, with 1440p 4:3 stretched resolution and maxed out graphics in every single setting, this card was barely dropping under 300 FPS, which is insane. I was expecting potentially quite a bit of dips, but that was not the case. This 2070 Super really performed extremely well in Counter-Strike, and truthfully I was really impressed with how it was outputting so many frames, specifically in comparison to the 2080 Super, which was pretty much similar. Now moving on from Counter-Strike, I took it to Valorant, which is a little bit of a more graphically intense type of game. Now here, yet again, the graphics card was rarely dropping under 250 FPS, which is again pretty insane for a 2070 Super. What I found is that even at 1440p with maxed out graphics yet again, this card was solidly outputting a high amount of frames, more than I would ever need when it came to 1440p. So again, if I'm playing Valorant and Counter-Strike, I would never need anything like more than a 2070 Super when it comes to gaming. My 2080 Super, for example, is complete overkill. But now I really wanted to challenge it, and here I went at 1440p maxed out graphics on Call of Duty Modern Warfare, jumped in a deathmatch. I actually did pretty well, so should I say myself, around 20 kills, 9 deaths, and that wasn't with camping. I'm sure you'll see from my footage that's pretty much running and gunning with an M4. But here, what I was surprised to see is that yet, despite this game being a lot more intense, yes, the FPS numbers were dropping, and I would say I was averaging around 90 to 100 FPS. But at maxed out graphics at 1440p, it was still extremely impressive to see how well the RTX 2070 was coping with, well, a lot of challenging graphics being thrown at it. And finally, I went on to Destiny 2, which I feel is even more intensive, specifically how of a beautiful open world game this is. And furthermore, when it comes to, again, maxed out graphics at 1440p, how this graphics card would perform. Now here is where the graphics card kind of not faltered, but it dipped a bit more than I wanted it to do so. I didn't really notice any of the dips when it came to actually using it, but I could see it hovering at around 70 to 80 Hertz or 80 FPS, and here the graphics card, you can see at 1440p maxed out graphics, was being a lot more pushed, and I could even hear it in terms of the fans. It seemed that they were ramping up just a little bit more in comparison to the other games I was playing. What I will say here is that yes, the 2070 Super was being very much pushed, and I wasn't hitting solidly 100 FPS plus, but still this graphics card was giving me a fantastic experience, to the point where I never saw myself really needing a more expensive card. Even like my 2080 Super, I didn't really need that because the 2070 Super really did tick all the boxes. So with the benchmarks and analysis out of the way, what do I make about the RTX 2070 Super? Well, quite frankly, if I'm gaming at 1080p or 1440p, the 2070 Super is more than enough to cope with everything I'm throwing at it. Yes, granted, I will be dropping periodically from 144 Hz down to 80 to 90 Hz in Destiny 2 or for example Call of Duty, but it didn't hamper my experience or my performance, as you might have seen in Call of Duty, in any way, shape or form. The only thing is over here is if I had a multi-monitor setup or a 4K monitor, would I be looking to actually upgrade? And this is where my suggestion would lie. If you're looking for that type of resolution, or looking for a multi-monitor setup, or you're playing, like, say, sim racing, and you've got, you know, let's say 3-4 screens around you, then you're going to want the more later generation cards, which are not only more powerful, but will provide you all those FPS that you might be wanting and needing when it comes to your gaming. So hopefully this independent, unbiased review has given you an indication of how the 2070 and 2080 Super cope in real world gaming scenarios, and also gives you synthetic benchmarks. If you like this type of video, make sure you give it a like, subscribe to see more. Now, of course, favorite and share if you feel that this video will be helpful for those people who are considering upgrading their graphics cards. Alright guys, I've been Totally Dubbed. Take care and bye bye.